And now, the host of Quirks of Israel, Reverend Peter Faust.
Hey, how's it going? Oh, okay. All right, camera guys, okay. Hey, everyone. Good to see you. Thank you for coming. Thank you. So good. Such a good-looking audience. Yes, okay. Good. All right. Oh, this is so lovely to be back. Like this, eh? Okay. All right. Okay, right? Welcome to episode 18 of the Quirks of Israel. All right. Welcome. Thank you for coming. You didn't have a choice. Thank you. Today's episode is called To Ride a Camel or Not to Ride a Camel? That is the question. In Israel, if you visit any store that sells hand-carved olive wood gifts, such as Levitical scenes of priests carrying the Ark of the Covenant, displays of the Last Supper, Moses with the stone tablets of the Ten Commandments, or candlesticks, this will be a highlight for any tourist wanting a beautiful souvenir to take home. And some of the best olive wood carvings are to be found in the shops of Bethlehem. Remember that. Now, the most famous of olive wood carvings is the camel, the iconic animal of the desert and Middle East. It's a beautiful creation, reflects the natural color and grain of olive wood, and makes for a handsome ornament for a bookshelf or desk, and reminds the owner of the Holy Land. So there's olive wood camels, and then there's the real thing. I'm talking about 1962 Peter O'Toole starring T.E. Lawrence in Lawrence of Arabia. Flowing robes, fancy headdress, classy English accent, riding atop a camel, charging into battle, scimitar, flashing in the desert sunlight with Prince Faisal, the son of Sharif Ali, Sheikh of Mecca, at his side. Great film. But now let's get more serious and down to earth. Every year, thousands of people relive the days of Lawrence of Arabia by climbing upon a camel near the Dead Sea or atop of the Mount of Olives for their glorious 2-minute ride, that perfect photograph, and the chance for bragging rights. I've ridden a camel. And this is great fun. Or you may even wind up at a camel ranch. Yes, that's what they're called. At a place such as Kfar Hanukdim, a recreation of the Bedouin village. You will meet the Bedouin, drink strong coffee, eat great Bedouin food, choose to dance around a fire with your friends, sing songs, try to sleep on an uncomfortable, smelly mattress in a grand Bedouin tent, avoid camel spiders, scorpions, and desert foxes, or choose to stay in the serene and majestic sunrise in the desert and then go on a 20-minute camel ride for the next morning. It's all for the wonderful sense of adventure and exploration. It's kind of like a Disney World Bedouin experience, but it's great fun. However, if you're scared to death of a camel, there's always a donkey. So don't worry. Camels aren't a threat anyway. I mean, they're pretty laid back. Just keep an arm's length of their mouth and don't lock eyes with the brutes. But if you're craving more of a realistic, charged adventure than the Disney Bedouin experience, then there's another level, the platinum level. Truly Indiana Jones stuff, where I'm not going to lie or butter you up with fluffy images of fun and safety and clean quarters. You could go on a full camel excursion and die if you're not careful. That's the platinum level. That's the full meal deal. That's what I did in 2004. I mean, obviously avoided the death part though, which is good. Let me regale you, with my camel adventure of a lifetime. In October 2004, I, along with several Bridges for Peace volunteers and a few other German volunteers from other organizations, went to a camel ranch embedded deep within the Negev desert for a true camel experience. We hired 2 Israeli guides, Shai and Yaniv, who were experts in desert horticulture, Bedouin cooking, and professionals of the camelus dromadarius, or simply known as the camel. We departed at dawn, and over the course of 4 days, we traveled nearly 70 kilometers through the desert. We carried everything we needed: large jugs of drinking water, sacks of vegetables, containers of flour and other foods, coffee and tea leaves, first aid kits, bedding, extra clothes, some tools, and much more, all to survive the harshness of the desert. It was extremely hot during the day and cold at night. Every day we basically began much the same. We would rise early, and everyone would have a job preparing breakfast, packing up, and saddling the camels. Try to make a kind of a cowboy western film about that. We would travel from about 6 a.m. until 2 p.m., and the only way I survived, not going stark raving mad with hunger, was eating power bars and trail mix. At 2 p.m., it was getting very hot, and so we would set up camp in a very clever style, I might add. So picture a square. We would position a camel at each point, so 4 in total, and then unpack a large black tent canvas with a rope at each point. We would tie the ropes to each camel's saddle, and then with a single pole in the center of the canvas, one would just have to stand it upright and voila, a tent. Then we would make lunch, eat to our heart's content, and everyone would nap to regather their strength. Except for me, of course. My strength was endless in those days, and I would hike through the mountains, exploring caves and discovering fossils, mostly ammonites, all over the place. At around 4 p.m., we would collapse the tent, pack everything up, mount our camels, and continue for another 2 or 3 hours. Shai and Yaniv were brilliant guides and characters themselves. They taught us about the desert, how to care for the camel, and shocked us with incredible survival tactics and tips on how people in ancient times lived in the desert and traveled in caravans. For instance, I recall Shai taking a number of us on a hike, and he pointed down to a gnarly root growing up from the ground. He instructed us to pluck it from the hard soil and then rub it between our hands. As I did this, bubbles formed on my skin, and he smiled and said, "Desert soap, Peter. It cleans your hands." I stared at Shai in wonder, much the same way as when I was a young boy, I saw a magician pull a rabbit out of a hat. Or take starting a fire as another example. Wood is extremely scarce in the desert, and so we would gather what we could, but Yaniv showed the group how nomads for centuries had used camel droppings, a fuel to start their fires, okay? Now, it's kind of like kindling because the camel preserves every drop of moisture possible, so its excrement is extremely dry and odorless. Thank the Lord. Yaniv didn't disappoint. We lit the fire with camel dung and were not greeted by any foul smells. Shai also told us that a camel is a brilliant animal and not only built for the desert, but it's built for being a caravan animal. Caravan animal. Oh, look at that. Caravan animal. Hey, I think that deserves an applause. Hey, once in a while I get a little tongue-tied, and you guys, you have a lot of patience for me. So, once you take a camel on a particular route, it will remember the way for its entire life. Not to mention, a camel can carry a massive burden and go without water for days. So speaking of water, we actually fetched water from a stone well that was still in use since the days of Abraham. Hey, isn't that amazing? The bread, coffee, and tea were to die for. Shai would make a gooey dough while Yaniv built a fire. Once the fire had burned to glowing embers, he would scrape the top coals away, plop the dough down over the thin layer of smoldering embers, and then cover it with the larger coals. After about 10 minutes, he would clean off the coals and produce a beautiful round loaf of bread that tasted like heaven. We also drank thick black Turkish coffee or mint tea, and afterward would clean the glasses with the desert sand so as not to waste water, which actually worked well. Now, on the final night, Shai sent us into the wilderness to have some time alone to pray or reflect. He had impressed us with the speech of an orator on how many people in the Bible spent time in the desert from Abraham, Moses, David, and Jesus. He felt we should do the same. I made it my point to try and climb to the highest peak I could see. And after some time scaling the cliffs and climbing higher and higher, I sat perched upon a mountain peak, staring across the Negev desert as the sun began to set, and marveled at what I saw. But one thing really deeply moved me, and that was when I held my breath. You see, my ears were trying to pick up some kind of noise, any sound, but there was nothing. There was no wind, there were no voices, no groaning camels, certainly no honking of horns and things like that, nothing. The loudest sound happened to be my heart, and that reverberated in my ears like a drum. By the end of 4 days in the desert, I had 4 epiphanies. Number 1, the desert is incredible, and it's an incredible part of God's creation, staggeringly beautiful. Number 2, I had become a modern-day Lawrence of Arabia and camel expert. Number 3, I refer back to my previous answer for number 2, as I attempted to ride a camel without a saddle. And finally, number 4, I praise the Lord for proper washrooms with showers. I don't think the Bedouin life would be for me. Israel is quirky. Join me on episode 19 of the Quirks of Israel as I bring to you remembrance and barbecue. Cheers and shalom.